Greetings, compadres. I have a guest today, and I'm super excited about it because I haven't had a chance yet to hear her story, and I am just intrigued by her. So I'm super excited that she's here. And on that note, your mystery meat sandwich for today is a quote by Golda Peretsky, and it's health isn't about being perfect with food or exercise or herbs. Health is about balancing those things with your desires. It's about nourishing your spirit as well as your body. So here's the thing, before I get into reading my guest's bio, for me, I kind of feel like wellness is one of those elusive things, like we're all kind of like wanting it, or many of us are wanting it. How do I incorporate wellness into my life, right? But then for somebody like me, it sort of seems like the Bermuda Triangle. Like, does it exist? If so, how do I do it? How do I integrate it? And what I've come to, and what I like about that quote is, I don't know, maybe for me and maybe just for right now at this moment, maybe it's like in the seeking, right, that I find balance. And it's not maybe just one of those black and white, like, turning points for me, at least for today. That might change. Who knows? And I'm definitely open to it because I think this is just such a wonderful concept. I can't wait to hear more about it. So as I move into the chaplain's chat, I'm thrilled to have Megan Swan on this podcast episode. So she and I are both sober curators for the Sober Curator website. And so I'm just pumped. And here's her bio already. It's pretty amazing. I mean, I'm super intrigued and inspired just by her bio. So she's an integrated wellness coach and strategic advisor specializing in working with high performance humans, entrepreneurs, and modern companies to help them thread strategic wellness practices into their existing routines and company culture. So cool. In doing so, it enables more sustainable energy, motivation, and confidence to achieve their goals without burnout. At 30, listen to this, you guys, she sold everything to embark on her own eat, pray, love journey of sorts. What? And now at 43 finds herself still on her first stop, where she fell in love with one of her English students. Ooh. She and her husband have 2 beautiful boys and 3 adorable dogs. They love to travel and explore the lesser-known beaches of Mexico. She has 10 plus years of integrative wellness experience as a certified IIN health coach, plant-based chef, yoga teacher, and consultant. She's on a mission to make wellness a way of life and not a check mark on your to-do list. I mean, that's exciting. So, Megan, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Wow. Thanks, Amy, so much for having me. It's an honor. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to know each other more as well. Your story I find fascinating and inspiring too. So let's have at it.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'd love to do is just give you an opportunity to kind of have the floor and launch into as much or as little of your background, sort of your story of how you got to where you are right now. And yeah, as little or as much as you're comfortable with. Take it away, Megan.
Sure. Well, as you'll get to know, I'm pretty much an open book, but I'll kind of answer the eat, pray, love part just to give context of how it is that I'm Canadian, but I've been living in the south of Mexico for the last 13 years. I was just not feeling completely satisfied with my life on multiple levels at 30. And I knew, or I felt that it was kind of like now or never in terms of making like a relatively my plan, the little plan there was I was going to spend a year in Mexico a year in Bali, because, you know, the movie or the book, and then, you know, see where the universe takes me kind of thing was the loose plan. And jokes on me, because 13 years later, I'm still here in Mexico on my first stop. But yeah, my journey with wellness specifically, you know, I kind of refer to yoga as a gateway drug. It was my gateway drug, if you will, into wellness. And I had kind of discovered that just before I left Toronto. So I got certified as an Ashtanga yoga teacher, and I felt like I was going to travel the world between teaching English and teaching yoga, and, you know, seeing where life took me. And yeah, it really wasn't until post baby number 2. I think another place where a lot of women find new levels of wellness and awareness around health and wellness are when they get pregnant. So again, for me, I was pretty health and wellness obsessed with my first pregnancy, a little less so with the second, but, you know, very much living this kind of double life at that point. We taught yoga. I owned a yoga studio. But I also really liked wine. So I kind of ebbed and flowed between these two characters, if you will, of, you know, wellness guru yogi and, you know, fun party girl wino in the evenings, starting on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And yeah, it wasn't until birthing babies, between being pregnant and breastfeeding pretty much back to back, you know, I had a very normalized, in terms of society, window of sobriety, if you will, where I hardly drank anything for 4 years. And I think that was really informative, but I was still at that point, like, looking forward, if you will, to getting back to drinking. I was, however, aware, like, even from childhood, growing up with an alcoholic father, that there were like certain things that you know, we always think we're going to parent better and differently, right? So I also had that sort of narrative in the background of, you know, I'm going to do this, but not like my parents did or whatever. And ultimately that was kind of like I mean, there's lots of sort of rabbit holes we can go down here, but I did this, I would say, wellness swashed intent of mindful drinking, in air quotes, for a year, which was essentially like any addict's attempt to put rules on a bad habit, right? And I certainly behaved better, and I felt like I was in more control, but ultimately I just had like one last rock bottom where I was just, you know, crossed a bunch of lines I said I would never cross. One of them being driving my kids drunk, and you know, nothing happened, thankfully. But I do remember like doing this sort of head bob of like almost falling asleep at the wheel. And I certainly don't remember the entire drive home kind of thing, which was, you know, pretty common for me in my 20s and 30s before I had kids. But I hadn't quite done that as a parent. And yeah, it was like, that was March 17th, well, March 18th, because the last day I drank happened to be St. Patrick's Day. I say happened, I have Irish heritage, but we weren't like celebrating St. Patty's. I was here in Mexico at a girlfriend's house drinking a lot of white wine by the pool as we watched our kids all Sunday afternoon. And yeah, so I am what's called a spontaneous sobriety story, in that I didn't do AA. I just had it with myself. And, you know, I think there was all these other threads that had kind of been, or seeds that had planted for a while, that got me to that place. I was also working at that time with a health coach. And quickly upon working with a health coach, I had decided to sign up to become one myself. So I was getting like all new levels of knowledge, if you will, in terms of how sugar, specifically gluten, all the things, but sugar, at the end of the day, alcohol is sugar. And so I was highly aware that my relationship with sugar was flawed in terms of managing my anger and patience as a parent. Yet it took me like an extra few years to connect that alcohol essentially also, I mean, it does a lot of other things, but it also spikes your glucose levels. So, yeah, so fast forward to today, I really started off as a health coach, and I quickly saw that, in order to make sustainable, lasting change, we really need to make certainly a mindset shift, and ultimately even an identity shift, if we want to make it a part of who we are and not this check mark on our to-do list, or somebody else's idea of what is health or wellness to us. And I fundamentally believe that when we get to a point where you've personalized, I loved how you opened, that it's this sort of elusive ideal, and many people can't really articulate or even identify with the word wellness and what it means to them. And I would say personally for me, like I couldn't have either until like every time I sort of brought a new thread of positivity, and then that allowed space for a negative thread, if you will, or a loose thread to sort of fall away over time. What became sort of like a foundational baseline of health and wellness just kept getting stronger, or up leveling, if you will, however you like to. But I think it has to be a personal journey. And anytime, we start working with someone who kind of like has all the answers, and there's like a one size fits all solution to whatever, you're seeking support on, it's kind of when, I think you should have kind of run the other way and have some red flags around that being something that, I'm not saying it won't work for you, but I think we need to have a lot more awareness that, you really need to find what personally works for you, and then also give yourself the permission to integrate it in a way that makes sense and, doesn't completely override or require you to do a 180 on your lifestyle. So yeah, I mean, I can talk for a long time. I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, I love it. Thank you for sharing all of that. And kind of the very last concept of what you just said, and I made all these notes, but that was like I just got a shiver up my spine moment, is the whole giving yourself permission basically to customize things. Because I think it's become so, popular to like, well, here's the one thing and it's going to work for everyone. And then, those of us who are seekers, like we'll try it and it won't work for us. And then we'll think, or work in the way that we're thinking, that we would personally maybe feel successful or feel like it's making a difference in our life. Right. And so, then the tendency is just to throw that away, at least for me, like, oh my gosh, well, that doesn't work and that's BS. And then a few times of doing that with things and you just kind of burn out of it. You're just, forget it. Like none of this works. And so it's just such an interesting concept, giving yourself permission to customize it. That was just lovely.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I use the word strategic from the standpoint of, less is more, and really figuring out like, what do I like about certain things, or, and to your point, I work with so many women who have basically tried to adopt every trend for the last 10 to 20 years. And so now they're doing like so many things that in itself is burning them out, or at least it's like contributing to the overwhelm and the feeling that there's no time in the day, which in itself is, creates stress on the body in the long term, that you're constantly feeling like under deadline for this, that you didn't have time to meditate, or you didn't have time to work out as long as some XYZ expert said you had to in order to get results. And yeah, I'm just finding, particularly at my age, I'm going to be 44 in April, I think sometimes there is a place for dogma and like a lot of structure when you're trying to adopt a very different lifestyle or habit, if you're in a place of vulnerability that you need to like look to a different structure. And for example, for me, when I stopped drinking, like I had all this extra time and energy and not a lot of clarity yet. So I started training for half marathons, and I put all that energy into running. So that like immediately provided me with a different community that was, focused around running instead of going out on Friday night. And, that also maintained like a completely different, schedule, like everybody's up at 5 on the chat asking like, where are we meeting to run? And like, it just like catapults you into this other vision. And that served me perfectly at that point in my life. But then at some point I just decided, you know what, I think even though I said I was going to run another marathon, and maybe I will someday, I don't know, but I think just managing to do it once for me might've been enough. And now I still have my treadmill. I dance on it more than I run on it these days. Usually I just walk on it as I'm scrolling social media. So I feel like, and with like listening to music. But that's what so I've customized even what I got out of the benefits of running. I've taken what I liked and also just shed all the rest and been like, yeah, I mean, I really appreciated what it served me in that moment. And I know it was really important then, but it would be stressful for me to put this pressure that I'm like, if you want, I can also shed the identity. I'm no longer a runner. Okay. Like, maybe it hurts a little bit, but not really. Like, it's just like, no, I'm still a yogi. I'm a lifelong yogi. Also, even from the beginning, I defined that for myself differently. Like I was taught as an Ashtanga yogi that you had to get up at 4 a.m. and you had to practice for 90 minutes every single day, or you weren't like a bona fide yogi. And never once in my life have I done that daily. Like once or twice in my life, I've woken up very early and done that sort of class, if you will. But my personal practice has been personalized from the beginning. And in the beginning, I had all of this inner dialogue sort of rationalizing why that was okay. But now I apply what I've learned from sort of personalizing it for so long. Isn't it better that I've been doing it for 15 years, like whatever that looks like, instead of like trying to be someone that I'm not in somebody else's vision of what it is for 90 days or 3 years. And then like saying like, you know what, that's too much. So I'm not going to do it at all.
Yeah, totally get it. And completely understand what you're saying. And so I'm 46. So you and I are from similar generations of, I grew up with the whole, okay, step aerobics, and you got to do this, 7 days a week. And then, it was the fad diets. It was the Snackwell's cookies. And like, here are my friends and I thinking that we can eat an entire box of like these fat-free, chemical-laden cookies, and nothing against Snackwell's. I'm not saying whatever. I don't even know if they still exist, but thinking that was healthy, right? And transferring that into my adult years, I carried a lot of those same behaviors too. Like, oh, well, I need to do a ton of cardio. I need to eat low fat. That was the big deal still for me mentally, low fat, right? And so, suddenly I'm like, guess what? I don't even like cardio. Like it's not my jam. And maybe it was, but I kind of grew into enjoying other things. I started doing yoga as well. I started lifting weights, found that I love lifting weights. What? But I had to open my mind to the possibility that maybe there was something else out there. And I also, about the eating thing, wow. I mean, I've been through the gamut on that. And I mean, I was doing the whole, like, after I have a baby, I will eat nothing so that I can rush back to my pre-pregnancy weight, which, for 1,000 reasons is a terrible idea. And so, of course, we've got society and, all these things that are, pouring into our lives and all these messages received. And like, my husband said to me after my latest daughter was born 5 years ago, he goes, I don't even love it when you're really skinny. He's like, this is my personal opinion. So don't, it's just take it for what it is. But if you're doing that for anybody like me, for example, I don't love it. Like, I don't, but I want you to do what's right for you, kind of thing. And it was weird because I was thinking, yeah, who am I doing this for? Am I super skinny so that I can feel good about not eating? And I have 4 daughters. I don't know. It just started really becoming something that I thought, I'm going to set that aside. I'm just going to totally set that aside, and I'm going to stop eating air junk, right? And I'm going to focus on, maybe I should learn about really what nutrition really is, what fuel for my body really looks like today, because I had never done that before, really authentically done it and connected it with who I am as a woman and who I was becoming as a person. And that maybe all that stuff had its time and its place, even as a building block to get me to that spot where it was like, okay, so what if none of my clothes fit anymore? On the whole, if I look at myself as an individual, as a person, as a spiritual being, who am I today? And does this line up with that person? Do my behaviors in eating and exercise line up? So that's just me, but I'm wondering, how do you take women through this process of kind of getting out of some of those old behaviors, or looking at them even to see if they really serve them anymore?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll give you an example that's often something we come across. I mean, I talk a lot about nourishment, intuitive eating. Like, really, for me, I'm concerned about feeling good and feeling strong, feeling, I'm a better human being when I'm not hungry or, lacking any sort of nutrition. And therefore, I like that word fuel too. I think it's a good, and so really to some extent, it's shifting women out of the vanity reasons that we're even caring about these things, to go inward and be like, no, but how do you feel like when you wake up in the morning? Do you have energy? Are you excited about your day? Are you like puffy? Like, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the emotional, like what's going on inside? And diverting their attention to that and helping them tune in more and more. It's first a process of just noticing, how do I feel when I eat a big salad versus how do I feel when I eat, a cheeseburger or other like fast food or whatever. And I'm also about the reality that anytime you bring restriction around anything, the subconscious is the rebellious teenager, and immediately you're preoccupied about wanting that thing that you're supposedly not going to eat. Like, I'm always telling clients, no, have the chocolate cake, just be all there. Like, don't eat it quickly in the closet so your kids can't see. Like, have it in a family setting, everyone's enjoying it. Like, even better, make it together so the kids see like what goes in a cake, a normal cake. But just being super present in that moment. Like, what does the cake smell like? What's the texture? And then also, how do you feel? Where does it take you? Does it take you back to some childhood memory? Does it just make you feel guilty? Like, does it immediately give you a headache, a stomach ache? Like, maybe there's no negative repercussions, but it's just being very conscious of what's going on. And then, so, sometimes we make decisions to have the cake, even though we know it's probably going to give us a bit of headache or whatever. And other times it's like, yeah, now that I'm eating consciously those cookies that I thought I loved, I realized that they taste like cardboard. Like, I don't need that anymore. And you just, rather have a bowl of berries or whatever. And so it's very micro, gradual, and has a lot to do with us just paying more attention to what's already going on and reconnecting ourselves to the relationship with what we're consuming. And ultimately, I address like all the things we're consuming. Like, what are you reading? Who are you spending time with? How much social media? What kind of social media are you glued to the news, like all this stuff affects our overall sort of our vibration, I would say, but like our base foundational state of being. And you have control over so many of those things. And at the same, and so I invite people to get to a point where you don't feel like you're quote unquote controlling anything. You're just making choices, gravitating more to the things that you want to be vibrating with, if you will. So, yeah, I think it's really never an all or nothing approach. And the example I was going to give is that, I'm running a beta cohort of a course right now. And we just did the module, it's mastering your relationship with food. We did a whole deep dive on dairy, and every single person, or 6 women on the call, has a story of how they grew up consuming a lot of dairy. Like, we're all about the same age. My mom thought like skim milk was better than water, right? And so I used to drink gallons by the week, like certainly a massive glass every day. And I had horrible acne. I had chronic bronchitis, and I had a constant ear infection. And not one doctor would have ever have considered that may or have something about dairy. However, when I trained to be a yoga instructor, they invite you to go on an Ayurvedic diet, which is essentially vegan. And that was like the first time I experimented, if you will, with that diet. And I'm happy to go into that whole thing. But the point is, it was the first time in my life where I just totally took dairy off the menu. And at that point, I also had asthma. So my asthma went away. I haven't had bronchitis since. I didn't have acne at that point in my life, but I am convinced that I probably wouldn't have had as severe acne as a young teenager if I wasn't consuming dairy. Like, we just thought, cheese is healthy, everything, it's healthy, right? That was the messaging we were getting. Mm-hmm. And I don't think at this point in my career that any of those things are intrinsically unhealthy in of themselves. It's all about what's the amount and frequency you're consuming and the quality of the product. All right. And so just having awareness around, like, some people are like, and there was another woman on the call who like grew up in, I'm going to get it wrong, but one of the US states that basically is a major producer of dairy. And she was saying like all the massive health problems that her grandmother to this day, like every single family member has something that you could tie back to the fact that it's just in their culture, familial culture, it's not an option to like not eat dairy. And so it's one of those things where if you just kind of think back, like where did my relationship with this food start? What are sort of some of the things that were going on in my life, good or bad, that happened? And from that perspective, reconsidering your relationship. For me, it's been dairy, sugar, although I would still say I'm a sugar addict. I'm just very conscious about it, and I can say an easy no to processed cookies, but if someone like offering me a fresh baked chocolate chip cookie, I'm going to eat it mm-hmm. and enjoy it. But I think it's just kind of knowing, like, so for me, it really helped understand my relationship. Well, and I think it's a pretty common one. We're always, from a very young age, I remember my doctor, my dentist, everybody gave us a sucker on our way out of the door. Like, oh, you did good. Here's the sucker.
Yes.
Teachers would reward us with candy. Like, every major holiday involves a massive influx of sugar in our house, when, generally speaking, there was like no sugar in my house except for, Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter, Halloween. It would be like massive. And so there's just this deep emotional connection that we've all developed, good and bad, like, oh, you broke up with your boyfriend, I brought you a carton of Haagen-Dazs. Like, so everything involves this like comfort around sugar. And so if you don't accept and sort of revisit that on a deeper level, it's going to be very hard. You're just always going to feel like you're having to control it and sort of restrict, instead of making more conscious decisions around what you are consuming.
It's so true. The reward system, right? Like, I never was more conscious of that than when I was on Weight Watchers for like a brief stint. It was like, oh, I have no way to celebrate anything anymore, you know? And it was the first time that I had really kind of seen what a role sugar particularly, but food plays in our lives. Like everything was like, hey, let's go out to dinner, let's go get, you know, coffee and a pastry, whatever. It was like everything was involving food at some level. And not that that's bad, but it was just such a mindset and mentality. I mean, I was never getting invitations to like, hey, let's go hang out, go for a walk. Like that was just not happening. And that's okay, but it's such an interesting, it's an interesting concept to start having just some very gentle awareness about food. I haven't heard that really worded anyway, the way you just put it. I thought it was just so lovely too, the way you were incorporating yoga and sort of the things we do in yoga, right? We notice things, right? We are observing things. How does
Mhm.
this feel in the body, right? How does this feel on one side compared to the other side? And it's such a fascinating concept that you bring up that, you know, even just starting to notice our behavior around food or what we're thinking or what we're feeling emotionally, spiritually, what is happening with us mentally after we consume things. And man, the dairy, oh wow, yeah. Um, everything was dairy, right? Like I just totally remember that was a big deal in the 80s was drink your milk. You know, we had the food pyramid, we had the all
Mm.
the, you know, um, dairy council, and the commercials were like cheese, glorious cheese, you know, everything. And it, you know, it's interesting because of course we didn't know back then a lot of the things that we did that we know now. We didn't know you could buy some of those symbols that they stick on a box, you know, of a food product. And um, you know, just, you know, having that knowledge is one thing. Freaking out about it and getting completely over the top, I don't think serves me well. It's probably not super healthy for most people to just, you know, go from one extreme to the other. So, you know, I just think what you're doing is an incredibly vital and crucial part of moving forward in a non-toxic relationship with food and with other things in our lives, right? That we, you know, have coming at us all the time, right? Like you mentioned the news and all of this different stuff, not any of it inherently bad, but you know, how does this make us feel? And I had an example just the other day. I was reading about something that was extremely depressing, and I knew that's what I was doing. Was I was interested, I was captivated by it. So I'm like running down this rabbit hole reading about it. And I gave myself like 10 minutes. And then I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to just have an intervention with myself right here. I need to stop because it's not serving me well anymore. Now I'm going like a little bit bonkers in my head. Like, all right, you got the gist and move on, you know? And I think, you know, it's a learning process of watching what happens to us, you know, and how we process all of that information. So
Yeah,
it's
I
just
mean,
a,
I think
yeah.
it's so important that we're aware just the speed of information and the level of, you know, what we are being asked to process these days is completely different than, you know, what our grandparents would have. And the reality of reading something on written newspaper versus watching videos of tragedy, like our subconscious does not know the difference between you being there physically in presence and you watching a video. It's
Mm.
just, it's kind of like the same footprint, if you will, on your subconscious. And therefore, and I can't remember where I read it or but it's just, I think to your point, like sometimes we need to hear those stories. And I just encourage, you know, my kids or clients, you know, just take that moment and be sad.
Mm.
It's like not trying to be sad that really kind of builds up over time, because we're social animals at the end of the day. Of course, when, we see a tragedy fall, carry out somewhere else in the world, that, like, maybe we're in a position to send money, maybe we're not, like, even that's, like a very cop out, if you will, solution to feeling extremely guilty or sad about something that's happening. So, so I very strategically sort of control what I watch on the news. I try and do print instead of video. And, I don't check in daily. I live in Mexico. I allow my husband to be sort of the filter, if you will. Like, if I even just was talking to my kids on the way to school about this, like, there's lots of horrible things happening, and I just don't want to read that in the news every single day. I know it's happening, but I don't need to sort of inundate myself with things that are just going to make us feel uncomfortable. So have the moment when it does cross your path, something that is really horrible, and be sad about it. Like, maybe shed a tear and, send some positive energy to that side of the world. But yeah, I think there's a lot in terms of, we see so much and we try and not let it affect us. And that is kind of exhausting to our nervous system at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that, the whole concept of like honoring that feeling in the moment. Okay, this is sad. I think a lot of us are used to trying to escape that feeling, and okay, I got to get out of this immediately. I'm still guilty of that sometimes. Just, okay, maybe I'll just go online shopping. That'll make me feel better, which I know is not true. So,
Or
um,
scroll to somebody else's social media that's more uppity up. But yeah, I highly recommend the book Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lembeck. She, I mean, I love the book, and I love that she's one of these authors that gives you like her personal experience with, she was addicted to like teen novels of some sort, like these sexy teen novels. She'd buy them for her daughters, and then she'd get reading them. But anyway, she's extremely knowledgeable, and really kind of gives you a reframe on how important it is that we get out of this habit of just numbing with sort of the quick dopamine hits, be it your phone, like whatever. Because essentially we're cutting ourselves off from the full spectrum of emotions. If we're constantly just sitting comfortable, then we're never really feeling pain, and therefore we can never really feel pure joy. That it's this elastic,
yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. And so how do you teach clients how to, and I know there's probably so much you could say about that, but what are some, I guess, nutshells that you could give us on, or a general idea of how you help somebody to start incorporating this into their daily life?
Sure. Well, I start off on walking them through 6 pillars of wellness. We always do a deep dive on honoring their sleep cycle, because I think that's like the number one thing anybody can do to improve all aspects, be it physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health and wellness. And then even starting there, it kind of opens this idea of, integration of threads, because whether someone's sleeping as well as they could, probably we have to have a conversation about when and what they're eating, when they're consuming water, are they consuming caffeine? Like are they getting exercise? So like all the other pillars essentially immediately feed into the quality of their sleep. And then we decide, somewhat directed on where the client feels most called to focus on, but we do kind of one thing at a time, focus on a few threads, if you will, of wellness. Like, do they want to change their relationship with sugar? Well, that's the big one. Like, let's just focus on that. And they will see overspill into their sleep, into their mental wellness. Like, they're going to feel like they can handle stress better. They're going to feel more relaxed in most of their relationships. But we're just focusing on changing their relationship with sugar, not, let's say, eliminating it. Like, how can we change it in a way that you feel it doesn't make you feel like you're restricting yourself, but you're just making slightly different changes. And to what we were talking about before, I always start having them take or keep rather a food diary of some sort. So helping them sort of land this concept of what's actually going on just now. We're not going to change anything immediately. We're just going to be much more aware of what's actually going on, because one, we have very convenient memories of like what our behavior actually looks like. And, I don't know if you know, in the Barnum effect, like just as soon as somebody is, I don't know, sorry, I'm confused. The Barnum effect is another one. Hawthorne effect is the reality that as soon as feel like someone's paying attention to what you're doing, you're going to behave better. Right. So even if the person paying attention is you, when you're forced to write down every single thing you ate and how you felt about it, you're probably going to live a little bit differently. But still, it just makes you more aware of all these things playing into your choices and how you feel about it. And I feel like very organically, my clients just start making better decisions, and we layer it. So we'll focus on one or two things for the first 2 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks, a different one or two things. And I'm like micro things, meaning you're going to turn off your phone 5 minutes before you go to bed, and you're going to read a poem, or you're going to give yourself a hand massage, or you're going to listen to binaural beats or something, but no screens. So like tiny shifts. And then over time, they'll figure out which ones they really like and they keep. And they become so much a habit that they feel it's like brushing their teeth. So by the time we've usually worked together about 6 months, sometimes a year, they have stacked all these positive changes in a way that they don't feel like it's things they have to remember to do. They're just doing it.
Love it. That is incredible. I love that too, because when you look back after some time has passed, and you see the progress, how differently you're probably looking at things, that's got to be really encouraging, because then that kind of translates into other things, well, maybe that, art class that I wanted to take or whatever isn't such a dumb idea after all. Maybe there's a reason my soul is pulling me towards it, and it's something that, is calling me. I mean, I think it's just a neat idea that, this could be just, a new way of living that just begins to dogpile, and spill over into other areas. I think it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, the sixth pillar that I touch on is joy, creativity, which can thread in spirituality for most people. Sometimes it leans into a conversation about self-actualization in the realm of sexuality. And yeah, I highly recommend that everybody schedules 1 hour of joy a week on the calendar, whether that's an art class, whether that's doing something with somebody else, whether that's sitting in the bath by themselves, whether it's, going like whatever to you brings out the feeling of joy, or a place that you can express yourself creatively. Maybe it's dance class, maybe it's Zumba. For me, a while it was aerial yoga, which was like a blast. But just something that you're like doing it for no other reason than it's fun. And I think particularly as moms, like we just worry about that our kids have that all met all the time, and we don't put it on the calendar. And as a mom, like if I don't put on the calendar and negotiate that time, it doesn't happen. So finding that outlet for yourself where it's like, yeah, no, I'm just doing this little thing for me. It's just like, and it's a non-negotiable, and you'd be surprised like what comes out of you just having that space, that energetic space to be you and do your own thing for, for an hour a week. It can be really transformational even itself.
And probably not putting any requirements on it in terms of, oh, well, this is going to be a goal-oriented thing. If I'm taking an art class, then I'm going to be painting murals on my kids' walls in 6 months.
Exactly.
I think our
no
tendency.
objective, no goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is hard for people.
Yes.
As is, I feel like it's harder for us to just do nothing. Like sometimes I'm like, what should I do? I'm like, just put on the timer for 5 minutes, because I guarantee it's going to, it's not going to be easy at first. Eventually you might get to hours, but just do nothing. Like, don't listen to a podcast. Don't scroll social media. Sure, look out the window and stare at a tree or something, but like, just do nothing, just be. And it's increasingly hard.
Yeah. Oh man. I think it is for me too. And sometimes I'm slowly learning that like, okay, so if I have like 21 minutes or something, it is not worth it for me to try and delve into something because I don't have enough time to do that really, but I'm trying to convince myself that I do. And really to honor my body and my mind, the healthy thing for me to do at that point is just go, this is a gift. I have 21 minutes to do a breathing exercise, maybe to just get outside and just get a little bit grounded and just stand with my shoes off in the grass. I mean, whatever it is. But I think, our tendency, at least mine, I'll speak for myself, is like, oh, fill it, fill it, fill it. What am I going to do? Oh, 21 minutes. This is going to make a huge difference. If I like pour in this and that and the other thing. And, it's like,
Yeah, no, we have to make our time off as efficient as possible as well.
Right. That's so good. It's so
it's
true.
hard, but yeah, I mean, we're just exposed to so much, and there's just so much on our radar. And part, I think, of finding this ebb and flow of what wellness means to you is knowing like, what are your personal boundaries or limits, if you will. It's like, I can, I'm personally this year focusing on more self-actualization in the category of my sexuality and learning different breath work techniques. Sure, I'm doing a bunch of other stuff, and that gets done because all that other stuff is now at a point in my life that I don't need to think of it as my to-do list, right? It's just, my morning routine is a given. I move my body when it works into my schedule and don't feel bad when it doesn't. And, generally speaking, I eat really well. I don't drink anymore. Like, there's all these things that are kind of like a given. And so I'm focusing on these other two things. And, I also have a massive list of books I'd like to listen to, but if that doesn't happen, oh well. I used to just carry around so much residual stress, judging myself for not up-leveling myself on somebody else's timeline, right?
Oh, that is like the perfect way to bring this kind of in a little bit, Megan, because even when we started talking about, at the beginning, the customization, it's like, yeah, on somebody else's timeline. Why were we doing that so often? And yeah, I mean, it's simple, but profound, at least for me, hearing that today, is that even though I kind of know that, I keep doing it. Like, I'll keep finding myself almost blindly falling into somebody else's timeline or desires for me. And it's like, interesting that, after all this time, here I am still doing that, when really it's not even for me sometimes a matter of replacing things. It's like just kind of letting the things go that aren't really, yeah, no, I don't need to carry that kind of guilt around. Why am I feeling guilty about that? Really, why?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm wondering, like, what's next for you? Are you going to keep growing your business with more, do you prefer individual clients or do you do groups, both?
I do both. So I mentioned I'm running the beta cohort of my course, Wellness as a Way of Life. I'm hoping to open that to the public in April, and maybe for sure run it once, maybe twice this year. And yeah, I work one-on-one. There's, basically, I mean, there's lots of ways that people work with me, but the two major ways, if some individuals want sort of like more intense support over a 6-month period, and some women, particularly women that perceive that they have zero extra time, prefer to work with me in a more sparse, like we just meet once a month, but we meet over a course of a year, and we have a lot more support sort of in Voxer or in Telegram or whatever suits them. So it's like when they have space in their day, they seek support, but it's not so much, we don't meet as many calls. And it really just depends on, where you're at. I find a lot of people, I used to only work with women, but actually last year, like multiple men came seeking support, and I really enjoyed working with them as well. But essentially, people usually come to me with sort of one thing that they're wanting to focus on. And ultimately, after 6 months, we've worked on, it all, maybe not at all, but we've worked on like 12 plus threads of ways in their life that they feel more connected, confident, and clear on how they want to live their life authentically, and just, more at ease and fulfilled. And sometimes being at ease and fulfilled is just like a mindset around what's already going on. It's not about changing anything.
That is so lovely. And I have to thank you so much for sharing all of this, because I mean, that's life-changing right there. That's just life-changing. And the fact that even customizing the way that you get support is available is huge. So I think it's just, I mean, thank you for doing that work. I think even in that space, sometimes we get sucked into, oh, this is how it looks, get on or get off, like, so yeah, so lovely. Megan, where can people find you?
Sure. Pretty much on most platforms at Megan Swan Wellness, although I spend the most time on Instagram and LinkedIn. That's also my website, meganswanwellness.com.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I can't tell you what a joy it's been to get to unpack this with you, get to know you better, and hear about this fantastic work that you're doing. So what a gift. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
It was an honor. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. And for those of you who are listening, thank you so much. And remember to be kind, rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time. Take what you like and leave the rest behind.